Okay, good afternoon, members. Sorry we're starting a bit late. I have to read this script out to you, that's all right. So I'm Leo Madden, I'm the chair of the committee. I'd like to draw your attention to the following. Housekeeping, safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street past the University's Park building. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, if you sign into the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. Live web streaming. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and the camera zooms in to show the speaker. This is linked to the microphones, therefore can I please remind all attendees to turn the microphones on to speak and then off again once you have finished speaking. Members of the public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera used to webcast this meeting. So I've introduced myself. I'm going to go around members first and ask them to introduce themselves. That's okay. Can we start?
Hello, Councillor Stuart Brown from Fratton Ward.
Dave Ashmore, Councillor for Fratton Ward.
Judith Smythe, Councillor from St Jude Ward.
Councillor Robert New from Cobham Ward.
Okay, thank you. Apologies have been received from Councillor Benedict Swan and Councillor Daniel Weems. Is that right? Yep. Councillor Scott Peter Harris will be here in 20 minutes as a standing deputy for Councillor Swan, and Councillor Robert New is in attendance as standing deputy for Councillor Weems. I don't want to be stickler about this, but you're not down as a standing deputy.
That's right. I was asked to stand in because there were no other standing deputies available. And just to give you notice as well, I need to leave this meeting at 3:15.
Sorry, I need to seek guidance on this because you're not down as a standing deputy and I don't know if you can attend the meeting. Could I seek your advice?
On the issue of today, I don't have a particular problem with it because Robert's here as a substitute. Essentially, there's no decisions to be made today, so on balance, I don't have a real issue that is worth actually fighting about. What I would say is that if there are deputies appointed, they should attend, and obviously Robert's given an exculpation of why no deputy was available for today. So, Chair, I'd probably say on balance that there's no real issue, but I think you're right to raise it.
Yes, well, it is an issue. I mean, the Constitution, we decide the number of deputies we have and we name them. That's part of the problem. But I think it's also something I was saying to your good self just earlier on. I mean, I've got a problem over standing deputies in that I don't think we have enough of them. And I think we look at a constitutional change, or I'll put one in to say that anybody can be a deputy, a standing deputy to any committee. Problems particularly with planning, and people not turning up to that. But the idea of the standing deputies was conceived by myself and Mike Kendall, who was the city solicitor many, many years back. Because of the problems we have. But we confined it sort of to two and then changed it over the years, licensing committee, all the rest of it. So as an exception, I think I'm happy for you because of the difficulties that your colleagues are having to stay. Okay, Councillor Smythe.
Chair, I'd add to the fact that sometimes people turn up standing deputies who've not been trained. And I do think you need to have had some fairly recent training on some of these committees, particularly planning, where we're dealing with a legal framework that has got to be observed.
Have you been trained? Have you been trained?
In the past? I have sat on this committee many times for my sins in the past.
Okay, thank you. So, you're welcome to stay, as I said. Now, sorry, Robert, you said you were leaving by a particular...
Thank you, Chair. 3:15.
I will be finished with that. Can I now move on to the agenda, members, which is somewhere? So we've done the apologies for absence. Any declarations of members' interest? None? Okay, thank you. Can we do the minutes of the meeting of the 29th September 2022 and the special meeting held on the 27th of October 2002? Okay, members, we'll go through them. I'm going to do the big numbers. So the first big number is page 7, and I'll do them page by page for accuracy on matters arising, and that's okay. Thank you. So I'll do page 7. Lizzie, just the very bottom, in respect to the Safe Limited Portico, this should be followed up in the 22-23 audit and reported back. I think I've seen that in the highlighted, haven't I, later on?
I don't think it is in there, but I'll double check.
Okay, ma'am, anything on page 7? Page 8? Page 9? Page 10, I think in relation to halfway down the occupational therapy policy, we had a concern about a particular case. I've had an email on that, I think. I think there's been a reply to that. Well, I've had a reply. I hope all the members have as well. If you haven't, let me know. The Chair requested that the report be considered at a future meeting, providing more detail around learning from complaints from across directorates. Okay, well, we'll sort that out sometime in the future, James, okay. Okay, the data security breaches, again, Lizzie, you believed there would be worthwhile investigating this as reporting processes differ across the council. Any thoughts on that or any advance on that?
No, but the next reporting period, when we bring it back to this committee, we will factor in some additional information and data for you so that you have more visibility.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie, thank you. Members, anything on page 10? Thank you. Page 11. Just at the top of the page there, we did ask that, or I suppose we can only request, I don't know, rather demand, but that the beneficial for the relevant directors and cabinet members to also split infinitive there, I haven't noticed, have sight of this information. I actually didn't ask, how will we proceed with this, Peter? This making sure that the directors have looked at the breaches. What we want is, all we seem to see is getting detail to the breaches, but we don't know if the directors and cabinet members, for instance, and opposition members, in fact, are informed of these breaches.
I think you're right to raise it. We don't routinely do it.
Well, I suppose. Well, a note to the. Well, should I send a note to the chief exec saying we'd like to see it done? Yeah, I'll do
within your gift.
I'll do that. Yeah. Sorry, Judith.
I mean, that was why it was raised, because we couldn't see a chain.
Yeah, I entirely agree.
And we need to see a chain that shows that the directors of, and indeed senior managers of services, actually take notice of the report and that they themselves do something about it, because we can't do more than beat our breasts, really.
Well,
Lucy, sorry. Lucy, did you? Sorry, Peter.
What I was going to say is I'm happy to take it forward so that there is perhaps a paper presented to DMT in relation to the data breaches, and that we do that depending upon their feedback on a regular basis, maybe annually, if not more.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie.
I was just going to say, Lizzie, remind me who the sort of who's Ciro at the moment? Is it David, or is it you, or is it me, or is it the?
It's me. I didn't move quick enough.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, thank you. Anything else on page 11? No? Page 12? No, okay, thank you. So, agreed those, that set of minutes? Thank you. And then the minutes of the 27th of October, the special meeting that we had, the call-in meeting. So, page 13. Page 14, the second last paragraph as to what should be referred to the governance and audit or not, to be looked at by the Constitution Working Group. I sent an email to the City Solicitor, so we will be looking at that under the Constitution Working Group, which of course finally will come to the Council anyway, but on that particular issue as to what Cabinet members should or should not send to gas is something I've raised. Okay, page 14, page 15. They're okay, members? Thank you very much. Thank you. We now go on to agenda item 4, which is the Health and Wellbeing Board Constitution.
Thank you, Chair. That's myself presenting that report.
Oh, so forward. Okay, I can't hear you. Thank you. Yeah.
So this report comes to Governance, Audit Standards Committee because it's changed to the approved terms of reference to the board. The Health and Wellbeing Board have considered these and now recommending these, their revised terms of reference. The terms of reference to the board were subject to a much more extensive change in 2019 when we incorporated the work of the Children's Trust Board and the Safe Reports and Partnership as the Community Safety Partnership for the City into the Health and Wellbeing Board. That's worked really effectively since that's happened, and those terms of reference broadly represent that revised scope of responsibility. The changes proposed in the report today are mainly in reference to the change in the wider NHS structures, so the abolition of the CCG and the formation of the integrated care system and the statutory bodies within that, so the Integrated Care Board and Integrated Care Partnership, and also reflects membership of the broader base of partners really than we had previously, but have started to perform a really active role in the board. Paragraph 4.1 summarises those changes. Paragraph 4.6 sets out that this is an interim holding position in terms of waiting for new guidance on health and wellbeing boards, which was due to drop again as part of the wider NHS changes. That actually arrived yesterday, so that change to the terms of reference to reflect any changes there will be made at the next meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board, so this will be coming back again for further discussion to incorporate those changes. So this is an interim report really that just makes those membership adjustments and regularises the position with the new ICB body as part of the terms of reference. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you very much. Kelly, I was the first chair of this Health and Wellbeing Board. I have to say, it's grown like topsy, hasn't it, over the years? It
absolutely hasn't, yeah. I recall it was in its first establishment, wasn't it? So, yeah, yes. It's been going for nearly 10 years now.
It came back as a nightmare when I read the Constitution bit again. I think the only thing that I'd have, and that's fine, because there's been a change in, the commissioning group's gone, hasn't it? So we're into, so that's fine with that one. The only thing I don't know how it slipped through, but chairing arrangements 3.1 of the Constitution itself, and it is a little hobby horse of mine, that's all. And it says the board will appoint lead member, with chairmanship alternating. I don't know, I wouldn't have let that through when I was doing the Constitution, so I'm a bit perplexed about it. We tried not to use sexist language in that sense, but and chairship or chair actually alternating between the two on an annual basis seems to be. I don't know what members think. It's just one of my little hobby horses, that's all. Okay, thank you. Councillor Smythe, Judith.
I'm glad to hear that they are going to be further revised, because I think this, if you look at Appendix 1, page 21, it starts with aims. And actually this isn't a list of aims, it's a list of tasks, it's things that the board are going to do. This is another hobby horse of mine, as I've written many of these constitutions for other local authorities. The aims are to improve the health and well-being of the people of Portsmouth. And the aims could be, if it was chosen by the board, the aim is to improve the health and well-being of the people in Portsmouth, narrowing the gap between those doing well and not well, or helping those who are not doing well to catch up, or some other similar wording. But really, these are not aims, they're things they're tasks. So I thought originally that there'd been something missed out. Paragraph 1 aims should say, we're aiming to improve the health and well-being of people in Portsmouth. That's the aim. It sort of puts it in under paragraph 1.1. it's implied, but all the way through it's kind of implied. And actually, these are tasks that have got to be done, actually. They're not things we might aim to do sometime. So I have suggested to both David Williams and Kelly that's tackled when the next revision is done, and they've very kindly agreed that they will look at that with the board, and it'll come back to us with some clear aim. Just to say why this is important, everybody who's involved in the Health and Wellbeing Board needs to know why they're there. And a long list of tasks may or may not be relevant, because some of them might be in subcommittees or might not have that as their responsibility. People always need to know how to measure the work of a board like this. And indeed, when I was chair of the Health Authority and we were beaconed for public health matters, we received a national award for our then Health and Wellbeing Board. And I can tell you it was a lot more complicated than when you did it, Leo, because we had involved with 5 local authorities. But we did it by being very clear why we were all there, which was to improve the health and well-being of people of then South East Hampshire. Thank you.
Okay, now I like that approach. Speaking to Kelly first, and it's much better. Yeah, when you're going to have to review it anyway, so I mean, there's points to be taken on board, yeah?
Yeah, just to confirm exactly as Councillor Smythe said, you've very helpfully raised that point, and yes, really useful feedback, and we'll take that back as part of that wider revision for consideration by the board, so I'd expect that to be incorporated in the next report back to this committee.
Okay.
Thank you to Kelly for that.
Yeah, I think of Kelly anyway. Any other points, members? You're okay then. So all we've been asked is to the Governance and Audit Committee support the changes to the Constitution for the Health and Wellbeing Board set out with the report and recommend these changes to Council other than that cosmetic one that I put in. Is that agreed, members? Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, item 5 is the...
Chair, I assume that'll be minuted as today as well. I
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Sometimes the minutes are not explicit enough, I think. Item 5 now is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review 2022-23. Also yesterday you will have received an email from Julian, which he might address in a minute. So there's another bit to add to this in relation to some developments recently. But I'm going to hand over to yourself, Julian. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The report before you is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review. It is for noting, and we bring it to you because it's best practice for us to report on the Council's Treasury management activities for the first half year, and indeed we do it for each quarter. The report states that the Council has remained within its Treasury management policy and all of its indicators that were set by full Council on the 15th of March 2022. And as at the Q2 budget monitoring position that was reported to Cabinet yesterday, it's highlighted that there is a £2.5 million improvement in the Treasury management budget compared to what was originally budgeted due to higher than forecast cash balance, and also with increases in interest rates that have been announced recently, we're able to obtain a better return on our deposits. Happy to answer any questions on the report, and if you would like me to, Chair, I can give you an overview of the paper that was considered by Cabinet yesterday.
Yeah, could you do that? Could you do that, please? The paper about the Cabinet. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair. So, as I say, a clarification of the Treasury management policy was considered by Cabinet yesterday, and I circulated a copy of this paper to all members of this committee. Before referring to that paper, I think I should correct the article that was reported in the Guardian newspaper that suggested that the Council had invested 60 million with the Qatar National Bank. A correction to that article is the Council has never invested 60 million at one time within the bank. And it is also probably more accurate to describe these as deposits rather than investments, because an investment implies something of a much more long-term nature, and these deposits are very much short-term. With that said, the current position is the Council has 15 million deposited across 3 tranches with the Qatar National Bank, all of which will have matured by February 2023. These deposits, plus many of various other deposits, form part of the Treasury management activities that are described into the quarterly report that I've just referred to you. The article, though, it does provide us with an opportunity to reflect on what we refer to as our environmental, social and governance requirements, or ESG requirements for short, which we do as part of our Treasury management activities, and it is these that yesterday's clarification paper was considered by Cabinet. Whilst it is our first, well, it's our primary responsibility, and there is a legal requirement set behind this, that it's the responsibility of the Treasury management policy to safeguard public funds. But with that said, it is also important that we work within the context of an ESG framework. The ESG framework that we currently use considers 35 key issues, so there are a number of factors that we do seek to satisfy before we make a deposit with an institution, and at least 4 of those relate to human capital. And when we use the ESG screening process, we look at these to see where these institutions are ranked on each of those 35 categories compared to other institutions within the same industry sector. The institution rankings that result range from leaders to laggers, or in a more sort of conventional language, they rate them from AAA to CCC. The Qatar National Bank is rated above average, so it is not laggard, and it is laggards that we exclude from any deposits that we seek to make. The important point here, though, is it's important to note that the ESG evaluations relate to the institution itself and not the state in which that institution is domiciled. So as a consequence of that, the Qatar National Bank, which is domiciled within Qatar, the ESG screening process is not sophisticated to identify that the particular institution, in this case Qatar National Bank, is 50% owned by the state, and then use that knowledge to adjust the ESG rating around the state's human rights record. That said, we can change our Treasury moment at this point, and we don't need a resolution of City Council to do that. And we are now seeking to overlay the current screening process with a process that would identify those institutions that have any significant or influential control exercised by the state, and where that state has a poor human record, we would decline investing in that institution in future, and that would be with immediate effect. And that will then be, and we will be incorporating that new layer of checking into our 23-24 Treasury management policy that will come forward to City Council in March 23. Our contact, unfortunately, our contract with Qatar National Bank is legally binding, which does mean that whilst we're not able to withdraw the deposits early, once they expire, no further deposits will be made with either Qatar National Bank or any other state-controlled institution that has a poor human rights record. I hope that clarifies the position, Chairs, and with regard to Treasury management deposits taken by the Council.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I'll go back to you. Councillor Peter Harris, welcome. Any declarations?
No declarations, and just apologies for my lateness, Chair. I've been kept with work.
We've already put them in for you. Thank you. Okay, Julie, thanks very much. Now, could I just, on the email that we got yesterday, and of course all the members I don't think will have had it to standing deputies, but this went to Cabinet yesterday.
Yes.
So it's 3 Cabinet. Does this go to full Council?
There's no requirement for this specific paper to go to full Council, because the item was for noting only, because what we can do is we can change the Treasury management policy or enhance the Treasury management policy with this new layer without it actually affecting the decisions that have been made by City Council, because what we're doing is we're putting an extra check in, not putting fewer checks in.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I mean, I spoke to you earlier on, didn't I, because of the concern that you haven't seen this, but I think there's legalities involved as well about immediate withdrawal, obviously, but I do think putting that further check in, it seems to be the best thing to do. I did ask Julian how long we'd been putting money into the Qatari bank, and it is the bank, isn't it? Yeah. And it could be years. It could be 20, 30 years. It's just because of the way that the process is done.
It's certainly in excess of 5 years, Chair, that we've been if we have had money available to invest on the money markets, the Qatari National Bank would have been on our list of approved counterparties.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So the actual item on the agenda is up, and if there's any questions on the additional one, members, please ask. I noticed the difficulty, and it's usually a good report, I have to say, but I noticed the difficulty, trying to second guess what interest rates might be between now and some other time. But I have no particular questions on this or points. Members, any? Councillor Peel-Harris.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, I walked in and obviously I got the gist of, I knew what Julian Pike was talking about as soon as he started talking about the Qatari.
You were very clever.
Yeah, well, I anticipated that this question would probably come up either today, yesterday, and probably at full council as well. I'm sure that some members will be asking those questions. The issue, the thing that I think I just want to ask a question, if I may, it's more of a question about, we invest in national banks, and obviously you just said that we've invested in Qatar for a long time. 5 years plus. Are there any other banks that we've been investing in that have questionable human rights records? Because I think that's a question that we need to ask generally as well, because there could be others in there. I mean, are we investing money into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, which have notable human rights abuses? I think we should ask that question, because we could be opening up what I call a big can of worms. We could probably deal with this quicker by dealing with it now than dealing with it later.
Well, we certainly haven't got any deposits with Saudi Arabia, but we do have deposits with 2 other Middle Eastern countries, which again will be maturing in the very short term. With I think the latest one maturing in March 23.
Do we know which ones those banks are?
Yes, it's the. Can I tell you what country they're in rather than what bank they are?
That would be easier.
Kuwait and the UAE, sorry.
And are they going to be subjected to the same stringent checks that we're going to be putting for Qatari Bank?
It will be applied to all counterparties, not just any geographically located counterparties.
That's fine. I mean, as long as we're applying the same logic all over, I'm quite happy with that. I mean, the only thing that I do worry about is that we're not addressing them all at once. I think obviously you've articulated that already, Julian, so that's fine with me.
Yeah, I think, sorry, and it wasn't sent to you because we didn't know he'd be here today, but Julian did issue a paper on it yesterday to members of this committee. So when you read that, it's very exciting to read that, and so all the points that you're making are covered.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Neil, Robert?
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it's just more a comment really, just to say this is very welcome to see the speed in which this was able to come to this committee. I did read the report in the paper yesterday with regards to this, and I think given the recent social issues around the World Cup, and also the Council has placed on record in this chamber many times in recent years concern about not only local dealings with countries with poor human rights, but also government dealings as well. I think it's very welcome, and so just really wanted to place on record my thanks to the officers and also to members for raising this, and at Cabinet yesterday especially, and I think it's the right thing to do, and to thank the finance team for adding in the extra checks and balances, given the maturation of some of these deposits anyway, in less than or under 6 months. I think that we could probably consider that quite a good outcome.
Okay, thank you. We should have been more than 20 minutes late. Yes, Councillor Harris.
No, it's just, Chair, you love me really. Come on, don't tell lies. No, I just want to make obviously a note that this has obviously flared up, and the Treasury Management Policy is something that we all voted for at the Council. We all voted to support the Treasury Management Policy, so we're all culpable of what's happened. And I think Councillor New just articulated it very well, that the World Cup has shone a light on a lot of the human rights abuses and a lot of the issues that are going on around the world, and we have a pledge to do things well and do things better. So it's really important that the Council follows that policy, but also at the same time that we've been swift and we've done the right thing. And I think it's testament to everyone, all members of all parties across the entire Council, to actually get this done quickly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I did speak to Gillian earlier on, because my concern was if there were any other ones. And I asked him, because I had never seen Qatari Bank mentioned in any of the papers in the past, and that's sort of below the radar, if you like, because of the conditions that we had, which we've now enhanced. All right, Gillian.
It's partly because of the amount of detail that we're working at a much lower level of detail, and what we tend to bring you in Treasury Management reports is a much more summarised position.
Okay, members, any other questions?
Just a comment, Chair. I just want to echo the comments that have been made already about the speed that this has been done. We should always, as a council, be looking to do the right thing whenever we see it, even if it's been missed before. So, excellent work on the officers there, excellent work from everyone all round. We're always restricted as a council on what we can do when it comes to things like ethical investment. For example, one of the things I'm constantly trying to push for is like divesting from fossil fuels in our pensions, but that's something we can't do because that's regulated by a national framework. But where we can do things, and we can do things right, we should be doing, and I'm glad to see that we're all together unified on that. So thank you, officers, and thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you.
I agree with everything that's been said, and fast response and unanimity in the Council about the ESG risks of places like Qatar.
Okay, so well, thank you all for your contributions, and thank you, Julian, for that and for your good summary. Any other points, members? No, in that case, can we, the recommendations are the Council's Treasury Management activities have remained within the Treasury Policy 22-23 in the period up to the 30th September 22, and that we also note the actual Treasury Management indicators as at 30th September 2022 set out in the Appendix A. Can we agree those for starters? Is that okay? Because I don't really know what we do. The other one that you sent out yesterday, Julian, was for information. We've had information reports before, but presumably we have to note them. That be right?
It's not part of the agenda per se, Chair. I literally sent it as background information. The report went to, it was a public report that went to Cabinet yesterday, and I was just drawing your attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough, but I don't know, you know, just do things rightly. Do we have to note this, or you're saying it's an appendix, but it didn't come out as an appendix, Julian. That's the problem I have. It's come out actually as a report.
No, what this recommendation is referring to is
But yesterday.
Yeah,
the one you sent yesterday.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Yes, yesterday's report is not part of today's agenda. I just sent it as a piece of supplementary information to gas members, and it was where it was part of the formal agenda was Cabinet yesterday, so it will have been minuted and recorded there.
You do say in your letter that it's related to the item. Sent out yesterday, which is why it's given me a bit of, you know, whether we do it. It's just, I'm looking for the formal position, whether we have to note it or accept it that we've got information and it's an amendment. What do you think, members? Do you want
Chair,
will this go to full council anyway?
The report you're approving today will, yes. But the briefing note or the information item that went to Cabinet yesterday will not.
It's already in the public domain, I presume.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was. I think it was good to be sent those sort of things because I don't always look at the Cabinet papers, but I do sometimes, and it's really helpful. I appreciate you sending it.
Harris?
Chair, I think it's a matter of process. I think the process is that the report's already been published. It's a noting report. It's not a decision report for us to make. The decision report is the one that's on the agenda today. So, personally, I think it's just for information, and I would treat it as such.
Okay, well, thank you all for that. Yeah, well, it's an information one, and it's seen as an appendix to this report. Okay. Okay, members, thank you. Oh, thank you, Julia. Item 6, Internal Audit Performance Status Report to the 8th of November 2022. Lizzie.
Thank you, Chair. There has been a small amount of movement in relation to the query, Chair, for Portico and their safe amount. It's not contained within this report, and that's because we haven't yet to follow up on that action, but when we do, we will bring it back to this committee. There is nothing significant within this particular paper. It's just informing you of any movement and traction. There is, again, some movement within the overall plan, and beyond that, I was happy to answer any questions you may have. It's quite a short paper this time round.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie. Could I just start, Lizzie, the audit plan progress as of the 8th of October, page 3, page 41, sorry. We have this, Lizzie, we have the circle with volunteer. I have no idea which is what, which has been identified and which is field work or whatever. I presume this was a colour map to start with. I don't know, for instance, what is identified, 43% or 34%?
It's a very good question. It would have been colours stroke patterns, so apologies.
Okay. It's just a matter of interest. I mean, it's not. I won't lose any sleep over it, Lizzie. But no. And could you? What's your view on page 4 of the audit plan? It's just the gas services there, which is the third bullet point. And the current service contract has been extended for a year, following allowing the follow-up to commence. Does that give us value for money in that respect? We know the problems with energy anyway, but have you any views on that, or are you happy with that as auditor?
Sorry, Chair, could you give me the question again?
Page 43. Yeah, of ours. And the gas services have been extended, and if that's a good or bad thing to do, in your view?
In my view, and we have procurement experts in the room, so I'll be a little careful. I think it's always good to go back out and re-tender. I don't know the circumstances to hand behind why this is delayed and why we have extended. I think my understanding is correct that it is a short delay and there will be another exercise moving out. I don't know if Richard has any additional information. So my opinion would be, no, if you have a contract, 9 times out of 10, it's always best to retest and go back out to market. There is probably circumstances behind this. Richard, do you have any additional?
I'd have to go and investigate further with the service, but currently with the utilities markets, it's still very volatile. It's a very difficult basis to go out and procure and seek to get a better deal. It's quite similar parallels to consumer market, really. Previously, you could have gone out and gone on to U-Switch, for instance, and found lots of differences in deals that are out there. It's similar at a higher level as well. So it's not a great time to be going out to procure. We need to be timing how we do that as best we can. But I can certainly go back to the service and find out some more information on the strategy.
Well, yes, I mean, if you can just let me... Well, that's fine. You personalise it now, which is good, because I haven't changed my energy company either, since even though it's gone through there. So it's on that basis, really. And to look at it again, what, next year?
I'll have to double check with the service and see where they are. They work with a specialist broker in the market who'll be looking across the markets for nationally and internationally. So we'll have to find out what the latest advice is. But I can engage with the service and report back to you. Okay,
thank you, Richard. On this one, because I had just one more to do, but yeah, Councillor.
Page my query, but what are the consequences of delaying the planning and enforcement audit from the 22-23 audit plan? Is it something I should be worried about, being chair of planning?
I think no, because the nature of our review would be looking at the processes. I think any issues within the service, i.e. perhaps the turnaround in relation to the planning applications, you would already have visibility on in any rate. So I think delaying these types of audits are pretty standard from our side of the equation, because there is a structured framework behind and there can't be a variation of a theme. So it's pretty straightforward. So I would say you're probably already aware if there are particular issues outstanding.
I mean, I am aware of some particular issues outstanding. It's slightly worrying that on that spokesperson committee we have to press for those reports. We don't get given them automatically, whereas when I've been on other cabinet spokesmen's committees like education, we get regular updates as to trends about things. So, and I think it is a matter of concern for us here in this committee overall that the cabinet spokesmen's people's committees are so variable. I used to have wonderful progress reports regularly when I was on children, families and education. I'm sure Ryan Brent would agree with me that we just don't get the same from the City Planning and Regeneration Committee at all, and unless we ask for it, and even then it's delayed. We'll only have one such report this year, which will be, I think, in January, which is just not enough. So I just wanted to add that as a sort of appendix to my concern there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, noted, yeah. Thank you. I think it's the last one I have. Page 46, and the wonderful SIL monies. I don't think this has come up before, actually, SIL, so I find this one interesting particularly, but the report says there may be a number of reasons for this. However, it may pose a risk to PCC for the forthcoming charging schedule review. What does that mean? See, page 46, see it? The narrative under the top bit.
Yeah. So the exception that was raised around this is the fact that, and it's probably been impacted because of the pandemic, but obviously we've had a number of projects where the funding is to be used, and we've had significant delays. The fact that we carry over a significant amount, even though it is already allocated, I think is a concern. How much the pandemic has had a play in that is unclear. There is a risk, but I think it is something that is monitored in line with those individual projects as a whole. I think it's something that we just need to keep a little bit of scrutiny on.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to something that Councillor Smythe just said about access to information.
What page? Any page particularly?
It's not any page, but it's just reference to the planning. Okay. I think it's worth noting that access to information is important. I personally don't have that problem in the Traffic and Transportation Committee. What I would suggest, if you are having that issue, to speak to the City Solicitor, because the Constitution is quite explicit. You have a right to information, you have a right to that information when you ask for it, and I'm sure the City Solicitor will oblige. Chair, I just want to look at the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is on page 47, if I may. It's written down quite nicely there, Lizzie, and thank you for being so articulate as always. But can you just explain that in a bit more detail, what's actually happened there? Because I think for some people here, they would not understand the nuances of it.
So the Disabled Facilities Grant is a grant that is paid to us on an annual basis. It sits at approximately 2 million or around. It's part of the Better Care Fund. Individuals need to apply to have amendments to their properties. If it is above a set amount, there needs to be a charge against the property, because if they were to have significant amendments made to their property and then go and sell it, they would have gained an advantage, and in which case we need to kind of pay back. The exception, obviously, that has been raised is in relation to the charges against the properties, where we needed to make certain that where it was applicable, that was actually implemented. We audit it on an annual basis because we have to sign off the annual grant, but what we do is we take a number of those applications and follow them through to see whether we have followed due process with the application itself, whether it was they met the criteria, right the way through to have we obtained quotes and so forth for the builders. Most organisations, and Portsmouth is one of them, where the individual, i.e. the resident, the homeowner, can either, when it's accepted for the disabled facility grant, oversee it themselves, or they can ask the council to. When they ask the council to, there's an administration element to it. But we'll do an end-to-end process review alongside. There's generally very sound arrangements in place. There's just some anomalies this time round.
Thank you for that. I think there was a change made during the budget process about how the grant was administered, and I think that's probably highlighted the exception here as well. I think that's part of the problem. It's just, I don't think people talk about this enough. The Disabled Facilities Grant, it is a really good grant and makes a lot of changes to people's lives, and it's quite nice to see that it's been highlighted in the report today. Councillor Smythe.
There was a significant complaint that we dealt with, I think, at one point, I saw information of, so that rings alarm bells as well.
I think it's very similar to the one that I was very aware of as well. So I think that I'm glad that that's been dealt with, but I can't say too much more.
Okay, I know. That's the trouble we have with some of these. Thank you. Right, members, any other questions or points? No, okay. Well then, members, can we note the audit performance for 22-23 to the 8th of November 22, and secondly, the highlighted areas of concern in relation to audits completed from the 22-23 audit plan, including follow-up work performed. Is that noted, members? Thank you. Item 7 then is compliance with gifts and hospitality register. Okay. Peter, you're going to deal with this, isn't it? It's actually my favourite reading of the year. Particularly the very last bit where members are involved.
Yes.
I hope you read the members bit. Yeah. If I was the leader, I'd be getting an oldies package, not one from Fortnum message, but there you are. Peter?
I'm not sure I can follow that, Chair, really, but as usual, this is my yearly report relevant to gifts and hospitality. I think it makes ordinary reading, which is what it should make, in the sense that it doesn't allude to anything terribly exciting. What it does say is there's been 135 activities on the Gifts and Hospitality Register. I'd alert you members to the fact that on a sort of viewing level, the behaviours of the entry show that we are looking at things like cash, donations, gifts in a consistent way. I think the officership are dealing with it in an appropriately sensible way that can be justifiable and defended if required. I'll particularly take you to paragraphs 4.9 and 4.10, which deal with cash, which is always an issue of concern to me, and donated gifts. You'll see that there were 13 offers rejected relevant to cash, which is appropriate. Some that were accepted have good and nuanced reasons, for example, donated to the Lord Mayor's appeal. Similarly, in 4.10, entries of donated gifts, 17 have gone to the Lord Mayor's appeal, quite rightly. The others have been broken down to appropriately aligned reasoning. For example, British Heart Foundation, Afghan Settlement Families, Rough Sleepers Hub, all appropriate stuff. As your chair took you to probably in more in sort of humour than in sort of risk, the members' entries are fairly low level this year. There's been 2, one from the leader, which is not to be unexpected, and one from another councillor, Councillor Madgwick, both of which are within the remit of the appropriate policy and cause me no particular concern. In terms of benefiting, it is always nice to see that officers and members have been offered gifts for good service and sensible interaction with members of the public. So I don't criticise anybody for making an offer, and they've been dealt with sensibly. So I commend this report to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I give my usual one. I mean, I've had gifts given to me, by members of the public. I know, it's amazing, but
It's
there
an
you are.
extraordinary idea, that, Chair. But there you go.
And all of them I've put into the Lord Mayor's appeal or the Lord Mayor. However, I do accept that, some people who give you a gift and you say you can't take it will be disappointed. And in fact, it happened to me. One of them was a bottle of whiskey. This has gone back a few years, and I was presented by a group of residents because I'd done something. And some of them came afterwards. So I was presented with this, and I said, sorry, I can't accept this, blah, 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 but I put it in the Lord Mayor's bar, and I sent them a letter saying that. And somebody came and said that the person who presented it went home and cried, because they'd made all this effort to go around and collect money to get something from me, and all I could tell them was I can't accept it, and so it is difficult. So at least adult social care have their limit, haven't they, a fiver in certain respects to that. But I think this is very good. I think a lot of the donations to the Lord Mayor's appeal or whatever is an excellent way forward. But I can also see that some of the corporate ones here, one was refused, I noticed, but I have no problem with those either. I have to say, because we used to as members do a lot of networking. We don't do it anymore. But I've got no particular problems with that. But I have to say that in the report it mentions Portico having their own system. But yet there's an example of it of Portico in the papers itself. On page 57, it says sample bottles were sent to the port alongside a paid order of miniatures for an event, and that went to the Lord Mayor's charity. So I'm a bit confused. I assume that it says to go to Portico if you want any more information, but it says there's information on that, and perhaps they don't get as many gifts and hospitality as members of the public who are seen face to face, members of the staff are seen face to face. Lizzie?
I was going to say, I'm assuming the report that Peter's got is any gifts donated to the port, and I know Mike Sellers may be on the port and on Portico, but this wouldn't include porticos. They would be totally separate. So if the port is mentioned, it is mentioned solely on the port side of the equation.
That is correct. Thank you.
Except that the one at top of page 59 does say Portsmouth International Port. Yeah.
Chair, that's distinct from Portico, the legal company. Okay.
Yeah, but sorry, what I'm trying to get at, if we want to know all the activities of the port, are they in this paper, because we've got one here, or do you have to go to Portico and ask them? The report says go to Portico.
Portico, as an autonomous company, deal with their own things themselves. Anything that comes in on the ledger relevant to PIP or the port itself will come to me relevant to this hospitality and gifts register. There are limited entries relevant to the port et al. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Right, well, I thank you for the report. I'm going to say it before I forget. I think it's very useful to see. In fact, there's a sort of mark here, isn't there, saying, how highly our staff are respected because people want to give them gifts. The same, I've got people want to give them gifts, so that's a good thing. But it is difficult. I've been there and I understand how difficult it is to refuse. Sorry, Judith Smythe. Sorry, Judith.
Chair, thank you for raising the sort of human factors around it. I just want to look at the members' gifts and hospitality register. I find it unacceptable that the corporate gift, this is not a personal one, from the football club to leader of the council, Gerald Vernon Jackson, has an unknown estimated value. And out of curiosity, I Googled Fortnum & Mason, and they're very, very expensive, the hampers from there. I think it's careless not to have found out how much it cost.
Tell us how much. Come on, I'm interested.
Sorry? Oh, you can go up to £2,000 or £3,000 for a Fortnum & Mason hamper. I don't think there is one under 50, to be honest, but I was intrigued to see how expensive they were. And I do think that unknown is unacceptable there, and I also think that it's a corporate gift, and, put basically just to guzzle it yourself and not give a value is unacceptable.
Well, I think it's up to each individual, if they are giving gifts, what to do with them, and we'll seek advice from the city solicitor, and I've some sympathy with what you said, I have to say, you know. However,
Well, I was going to say,
no law has been broken.
Well,
No laws
some of them are really, really, I mean,
No.
eye-wateringly expensive, but I'm not suggesting that it was one of those. But it is very easy to look it up and find out which one you had and how much the value is, and I think it's careless not to have done so.
suffice it to say, the information was provided and the advice given. How that is interpreted is a matter entirely for the leader.
How can that be? That's what we're here to do, is to make sure we're all behaving perfectly, not to...
Well, I think, sorry, but I do
It's
think
quite
that
easy.
due to saying it would have been quite easy for the leader or whoever to have looked up and found out what the price of it was. It wouldn't have made any difference to the report here, other than we'd know, you know, the sort of money that was available. That's all.
Well, I've given the advice. I'll tell him what to do. It's a matter entirely of him, whether he does it or not. I'm not going to pursue him. It's not for me to cross-examine the leader.
I know it's a difficult one, isn't it? You know, people, yeah.
I'd like to record my disagreement with that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Peter Harris.
I think it's a fair point Councillor Smythe raises about the leader, because I don't know if the city solicitor can clarify, but would the leader now have to declare an interest, a pecuniary interest of the nature of the fact that he's accepted a gift from the football club if any issues regarding the football club come up across the chamber or any decision meetings?
You've anticipated the question I was going to ask, because I would say the same for the next one as well. If anything, because there's Councillor Madgwick has been given a pass in for a year, does that mean if anything comes up in relation to...
Take both at the same time.
To those, the football club in one instance and the historic record in the other instance, does that mean they need to declare an interest, Peter?
Subject to the circumstances of the individual meeting, I think they probably would. I've given similar advice to all members in this room relevant to Victoria every year. A similar advice situation subsists there. The advice is given, and if members wish to take a view, and if I take a view that there is a DPI, then it should be disclosed. Absolutely right.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that. I did think that would be the case, and I'm grateful for have it on record as well. I just want to come back to the international port in the document on page 59, because it does say Port of International Port. If you actually read through, the donor's interest is a Portico stakeholder. So, is Mike Sellers at that time, because he is named in the report, and I will name him in the meeting because it would be easy, is he acting on behalf of Portico, or is he acting on behalf of the port? Because both are separate entities, you know, and we have to treat them as such, because we don't want to be accused of state aid, for example, you know, so we have to be careful. And this report doesn't make it clear who he's acting on behalf of at the time. They're saying it's Portico in one breath, but the donor's interest, no, they're saying the donor's interest is in Portico, yet the actual service itself is within the port. It can't be one, it has to be one or the other. It cannot be the mixture of the two.
I don't disagree with that analysis at all. So far as the entry is concerned, it's been put down as, you know, a rejected piece of hospitality relevant to Portsmouth International Port. I think the point you're making is if it had been put down to Portico, you wouldn't be seeing it, and that's a concern to this committee. And I sort of get that in the sense that whilst we all vaunt the idea that Portico is an autonomous company, the reality of the fact is it's slightly emerged. I get that.
So, I mean, this is the issue I think we have with Portico and the port. I don't think we differentiate the two enough to know exactly when one is acting in the other, and I think that is a problem. And I mean, I think we spoke about this before at committee chair quite a few times, and it's not clear in this document who is Mike acting on. And I'm not casting any aspersions on Mike Sellers. He's a very honourable man, but we don't know who he's acting upon at that time, and I think that should be clear for us for our checks and balances for this committee.
But my reading of it is that it was a personal invite. And it says there the reason, which I want to come on to in a minute, was that he was going somewhere else. Is there a point to be answered in relation to what has been said by Councillor Peter Harris? Because I'd like to know, just follow on, if he had been able to take it, what would the advice have been? Because all the saying is, I can't go on that, so, and I'm not sending anybody else, so I can't do it. But it'd be fairly substantial with something in the box. At the Oval, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah, what would the advice have been, Peter, do you think, if would we have sent as a networking exercise, and you know, he's a very senior man,
I think the prudent advice is to take the view that, you know, whilst we know that Portico is an autonomous company, we also know that the port is essentially PCC and the authority. I think the sensible thing to do would have been to err on the side of discretion and say, you're not going to go, because this committee, quite rightly, will merge the two positions quite easily and take the view that potentially a Portico decision might be self-serving as opposed to a PIP decision not being self-serving. So I think you're absolutely right to raise the issue of clarity, because had Mike asked, I'd have said, on balance, there's the advice, take it or leave it, but my advice would be do not go. Secondly, I think the check and balance from David was reject, and that doesn't really answer the Chair's question, which is what had the position been if Mike hadn't a prior engagement. It's sort of self-serving for David to say, I would have rejected it, but he was never put in a position to be able to make that question properly answered. So I'm sort of with you. My answer would be, do not go. That's the easiest thing to do.
Thank you for that, Lim. And it's just the final one. It'll be the last entry on Appendix 2. And, you know, I'm just going to give you a bit of my personal background. I mean, I do a lot of hospitality through my job, and 8 people at less than £20 per person, I call a bit of a bluff on that for when you're taking people out. And I can attest to when I did this last week when I took customers out for my job, and there was 4 of us, and it was more than £20 a head. So I question the information, and I question how we record the information. Do we get a copy of a receipt? Can we actually validate what we're being told? I don't know that, because I don't know if we have that information within the report. But I really do question the aspect of 8 people attending a meal not being any more than £20 per person, and I'm sure most members in this chamber will consider if they go out for a meal, and it's generally more than £20 per person if you include a meal and a drink. So I think there is a validity in questioning, is that correct? What's our checks and balances? You know, are we actually getting a copy of a receipt to say actually it was within that time frame? I don't know. I think we should ask the question, because that to me doesn't seem right.
Could I just say that I think the cost is irrelevant. I think it's the invite that matters. And a meal could be, have you never been to Witherspoons? You can get a meal for 20 quid a, right, yeah? But I don't think if you're invited out and there's a good reason for going, I don't actually think the cost comes into it that much. And even if they come back, this would have been after the event, I suspect. You'd need to come back and say it was actually 30 quid each or whatever, right? Yeah.
But it's not that. The reason I ask is because it's a value over a certain amount, and the reason we ask, is that per person or is that not? Because that's the concerning point. Because if we have a policy, and you are right, Chair, I don't think the value is a concern, but we have a policy that we should stick to, and it's not very prescriptive within the document that we have. And I just question it, because I don't believe that would be correct in any form of engagement from any business, you know. And this is someone who has worked within an industry where I've literally entertained people for nearly 10 years, and I can tell you now that is not the right number, you know. So, I mean, I question it quite significantly.
But I think even without the number, that's what I'm trying to say, is it probably would have been agreed anyway.
I think what you've got to remember is that this is essentially policy-driven, in the sense it's a reflection of the behaviours of staff and members for a particular year. It reads pretty well when you're thinking about an organisation of this size and nature, that we've got 135 entries, albeit the amounts set are fairly low, and they're purposely set as fairly low. And I think you're right as a committee to question the sort of validity of prices and costs. But it lives in the world of conduct. It lives in the world of Nolan principle and transparency. So I don't think you can actually preclude an element of discretion based on circumstance, if I could say that. So you're right to question it, but I wouldn't necessarily think you need to be as prescriptive, unless you want to revisit the policy again and set different figures. And the problem with setting different figures, you'll get a different level of engagement at that different figure. So by all means, just take it into consideration.
I think on
it's
that,
not an absolute.
I think on that point about setting different figures, I think with the rising inflation and the cost of living at the moment, I think that is something that this committee should look at potentially. And I'm not talking like a massive jump, but I'm talking like a small incremental jump to deal with that, because obviously there are cost implications in everything that we're doing at the moment. And I'm not saying raise it from £25 to £50, for example. I'm just saying, do we look at that as within inflation? I think it's worth looking at. But it's obviously down to the chair.
Yeah, okay. Got that. Conscious Myers, Judith?
Just to verify, I've just checked on the website for Fortnum & Mason. There is no hamper under £50. The most expensive hamper is £6,000, a bit of an outlier, but it's expensive. I do feel really strongly about this. It's not responsible to say something is unknown. They're all identifiable. You could look at the picture and say which one you'd have. And I do feel quite strongly about this.
Because I'll write to the leader on behalf of the GNS. Nothing under 50 quid. Truth. Well, no, I suppose so. I've never been in Fortnum & Mason, so
the sort of website you and I would use, Chair. But
and the most expensive was 6k.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I must confess, it is very nice, Fortnum & Mason. I must confess, it is very nice. And but I do share Councillor Smythe's. I think it's probably disappointment more than anything, because it is very, and I think it is the right thing for you to do as the chair of the committee, to write to the leader and to dismay, obviously to convey what the committee have said today, but also to circulate that to all members as well about conduct and what is expected. I think that would be the right thing to do. And I know that it's something that you enjoy. You always enjoy this report. You always have, even when I was on the committee before. But I think it's a very important thing to do, because we have standards, we have conduct that we should be adhering to. And you know, and I think Councillor Smythe's right on this one. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the light of the fact that the rest of the report is showing staff being pretty exemplary, small amounts of money, £10 given in an envelope at an emotional point, and they're giving it to the Lord Mayor's Fund. And so there are two things here going on, one that it wasn't passed on to anybody, and one that it are not disclosed. And we as councillors must give an example. You can imagine that working for a housing association and employing people to on the procurement of building works, I was regularly offered very expensive opportunities, Glyndebourne, you name it, I was offered it, and I never took a penny. And I would even report when somebody had knitted me a tea cosy. I have very high standards here, and I'm never going to deviate from them.
Okay, okay, you come in right. Councillor Ashmore, Dave.
Thanks. The only thing I was wondering that you could possibly put as an addition on the members one, maybe for an additional transparency thing, and I don't know how far we can go on this, is maybe something to have like a reason why you've got that. That might help people understand how you've got it and why you've got it and what the relationship is, whether it's because you're the leader and you've been invited somewhere, or whether you're a councillor and a residents association or something, you've done a bang up job or something like that. It might help with the transparency rather than just this person received this from this. It leaves it open to it. It might just help with a layer of transparency there.
Yeah, that's a fair point, but he will have got it because he's leader of the council. That's the reason.
In general.
But I can ask that question, yeah. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just for completion, really, we've had the most expensive hamper quoted at £6,000. I've just had a look on the website. The cheapest hamper available is £70.
Correct.
Well, that's a very exciting bit, wasn't it? Yeah. We could be going bankrupt as a council, but we're worried about Fortnum & Mason. That's
I think
that's where we should have priorities. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Chair. I think it's reassuring that you've accepted that the council could be going bankrupt.
Well, no, we don't know about interest rates and inflation and all the rest of it. Yeah. Is that okay, Mem? Oh, where am I? So we can. Oh, sorry. Any more questions or points? Okay, thank you. Peter, you have nothing to add. Okay, thank you. So, compliance and gifts and hospitality protocol, the committee considers whether or not to make any recommendations for change, there are some points there, and I shall write to the leader of the council on the points that you've made, and I'll copy you into that so you know what's happened. And in the absence of any changes, the report be noted. Is that okay, members? Thank you. Right, we come to item 9. Item 9, which, well, item 8 comes before that, doesn't it? The exclusion of the public and press. You know all about the exclusion of public press, members. We have confidential papers here today. We've got the overall report on white paper. So anything on white paper we're going to do public if you agree to the exclusion of public press. And on the orange paper, we'd have to go into an exempt session. So I need to confirm with you that you're happy with that. If we need to go into exempt session, is that okay, members? Thank you. Okay, Richard, over to you for the white paper bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is in the usual format. It looks at 3 main performance areas: spend compliance, which is mostly linked into our compliance with local government transparency code, making sure that any contracts that we've got above £5,000 has been published out on our Intend contract register, and we enforce that through links in through our finance system, primarily Fusion, but we're looking into building further links. We've managed to develop that into the port system Scala. Still work is ongoing to look at other systems like Mosaic, which is the children's social care system, and Controc, for instance, a few other systems as well. In terms of compliance, spend compliance with Fusion, we're at a very good level, so we're above the 95% target across all services and corporately. Looking at the non-compliant transactions, I'm happy to go on those in exempt session, but there's nothing that causes any concern. In respect to spend via the other systems, we have got work ongoing to look at that. It's something that will take some time to do and will require engagement with the services as well, so we need to balance that priority against other significant priorities we have right now. In terms of compliance, though, we have very good governance in adult social care, procurement. There's a contracts team there. One of my own members of staff actually works half of her time with a line management position in adult social care contracting. So in terms of compliance of our gateway process, any contracts above £100,000, we've got a good awareness there. There might be some aspects where we need to tie up on some of the lower value contracts to make sure we abide by our transparency obligations. Similar thing in respect to children's social care with the Mosaic payments. They have their own contracts officer there who a person from my team engages with regularly as well. So before I move on to the next section of the report, I'm happy to take any questions by section, or would you rather just carry on, Chair?
Sorry, I didn't mean to leave this. I just carry on and
just
then
carry on, yeah.
We'll ask questions at the end. It's okay. Thank you, Rich.
So contract awards via waiver. We have no high risk awards, which would be significantly high value contracts where we don't have a re-tendering strategy in place. We think there's a high level of challenge risk from the market. So we have none of those again, which is positive. Medium risk, which is where we have we've gone above statutory thresholds, but we do have risk mitigation in place where we have a re-tendering strategy, or the position that we've taken is considered to be market acceptable. We have a number of those. It's less than the last time round in terms of volume and value. I think it's probably too early to say that is anything we can draw any big conclusions from. I think we just need to look and see what that looks like on the next report. Certainly from my position as having high visibility on waivers, we're certainly seeing a lot less of them going forward now as we've come out of the pandemic. I think there is still a backlog of work to get through that was impacted, and I think particularly in relation to where we have to balance priorities and risks, particularly in some of our commissioning activity with care contracts. We're always going to have instances where we have waivers there because the contracting cycle and what's the right thing to do on a commissioning basis don't always tie in together So we have to make the right decision for the service user. Number of low-risk contracts as well, but again, by volume and value, that's quite a significant reduction from the last report, and hopefully we'll see that again when I come back. In terms of the key performance indicators, we're in the process of overhauling that system. I think I've been quite open in previous sessions to voice my opinion on the current model, which I don't think is being, well, we know is not being applied, and I don't really consider to be fit for purpose. I think we need to simplify that to a simple single KPI, rather confusing people with 3 KPIs, and get to some consistent business rules. So actually, when we look at high value contracts, big strategic contracts, maybe all of those should be reported on quarterly. If we look at lower value contracts, do they need a KPI in the first instance if it's really low value? And at a certain level, do we just have a single KPI at the end? So there's some work to do to bring that consistency on, as well as launching this simplified 0 to 5 basis. We've now gone live on our Intend system, so we've tested the model, we know it works, we're going to apply it onto our primary contractor framework agreement, which have a significant amount of spend that goes through on that. And that actually has teeth within the framework agreement. That 0 to 5 model was built into that, so it's not just a KPI for the sake of it. It has meaningful leverage within the contract. The next step, we'll be identifying our top 20 big strategic contracts, and we'll be applying the 0 to 5 model on there. And then we'll just phase it through essentially. But what we want to do is get proportionate relevant business rules, so we don't create something which is too summary level for our big contracts. It's only looking at them once a year. Maybe we should look at more than that. It isn't creating an industry for lots of lower value contracts. So that's ongoing work. That we should hopefully have some really significant progress on that by the time I come back to the next committee. In terms of contracts that are subject to KPIs, on the system we have just shy of 1,600 contracts, so it's pretty similar to where we were last time. Over half of those, 60%, are subject to KPIs, and we're still seeing relatively low numbers in reality of those contracts that are being reported on via the system. That's not to say they're not being managed, it's just to say that the processes through the system and the KPI model needs to be refreshed. And then in terms of poor performance, I can go into more information on the exempt session if we go into that. We've reviewed the 2 that came back as red. One that came back as red, which was user error. That should have actually come back as a green contract with satisfactory performance. And one at amber is due to some issues with performance that the contract manager has reported are being addressed. It's being reported to the provider, and remediation is being put in place. That's essentially the headlines from the report, Chair. More than happy to take questions or on the report as it stands, or go into the exempt session.
Right, just ask, page on the KPIs and the page 81 and 82. The total number assessed as red or poor in quarter October to August 22 is 101%. And then overleaf the other one. It seems to me that people are now complying with the procurement procedure. Would that be right?
I think in respect of what that is showing is that across the contracts that have been assessed, so we don't have all of the contracts that are being assessed, we've got 60% that have got a KPI, and then from those, I think that we had 89 that were reported on. It's shown that within those 89 we have a good level of contract performance as reported by those contract managers with the suppliers. I think in respect of the red KPI, that was actually an anomaly. That was down to user error. That should have been a green. So from the ones that are being reported back to us, it's showing that that the providers are delivering to specification, and in quite a few occasions we're getting providers that will be going over and above based on the KPR score that's been provided.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Any other points on the conscious miles, Judith?
I was going to say, it does seem to me this is a much better report than we used to get when I was on GASC before, 3 or 4 years ago, and I think all the
Well, that's all thanks to Richard.
all the officers involved should be thanked for that, because I remember when I first came on the council 4 years ago, I was a little bit worried about things, and I don't feel so worried now.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment.
Yeah,
Councillor Peter Harris.
I pretty much echo that, because I remember when I used to read these and I was horrified. I'm not as horrified as I was. I mean, there are a couple of things in there, I think, and Richard mentioned it about the KPI requirements, and, you know, I think that's something that obviously you've attested to that we're going to get better on. I think we need to, because 40% is still not a great number. I think if we can get that number up, and I think it takes time, and it's more of a chipping away effect, and I'm sure that you guys will do that. I think it's important as well to ensure that we're getting the best value for money from our contracts at all times, and ensure that we can manage them in a way that is successful for the council. I don't want to really add anything more, Chair, because there is a couple of things I want to look at in the exempt papers, but I won't talk about them now. I'll wait.
Okay, I think on the white paper.
If I could also just say as well, I mean, thank you everyone for the positive comments, but I would say it's very much a team effort in the background. I've got Liz Wilder with me today from my team, who's here to observe. She does a lot of work into the report, and other officer, Liz Burford, does loads of work into the report along with our administrative team. So thank you for the positive comments, and I'll make sure that they're echoed back. Thank you.
Sorry, I should have. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sorry, Liz Walder. I'm the Assistant Procurement Manager in Richard's team.
So you do all the work? Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the white paper? So we'll move into exempt session then, because there are some questions that want to be asked. So we need to turn the whatever it is, the website off. Not correct?